Hey, the rules are the rules. Unless CrossFit decides to change them. Welcome back to the channel. So I was contacted by someone in the adaptive division, and I'm going to speak about that, but actually it's a much bigger issue. In fact, how would you feel if I told you this far along in the season, CrossFit are changing the rules? Or what if they're claiming that a rule was never applied in the first place? How does that affect the athletes in the adaptive division? Yes, I'll discuss that. But also, what about other athletes that have been victims of the letter of the law? So while yes, it is about the adaptive division, it spills over into all avenues of competitive CrossFit. So please stick around and watch the video because it might be more important than you think. Now, I always ask people, hey, if you're not subscribed, please do that. Help the channel to grow. Follow me on Instagram. And yes, I do that because, of course, it's nice to see more subscribers, more followers. But this is why I really need it. I was actually preparing a completely different video today. And then someone reached out. Someone sent me copies of emails. And they would not have done that if they didn't know who I was or what I do. So the more subscribers I have, the more followers I have, the more people that know that I'm doing this kind of thing, well, it's really going to help me to uncover these kind of issues within CrossFit. So those of you that have subscribed or do send me stuff, thank you so much. And if you haven't, please get involved because it really helps me out. And before I really get into this, I want to make something very clear. I am not here to attack any individual athlete or to challenge whether or not somebody should or should not be going to the CrossFit Games. That is not the intention of this video. But there is a rule book. And changing the rules now is a big issue. Maybe a bigger issue than they even realize, or maybe they just thought, well, no one will find out. So first, just to give you some context, I want to explain some of the rules that applied to the adaptive division. They weren't particularly clear at certain points, and that is something we will come back to. But if you signed up as an adaptive athlete at the start of the Open, these are the rules you would have seen. So I'm just going to read them to you now. So it's section 4.0, eligibility requirements for the adaptive division. To be eligible for the classification in the adaptive division, an athlete must meet 3 general requirements. 1. Prove the presence of a diagnosed and documented permanent impairment, i.e. health condition or diagnosis, from the list of 10 eligible impairments. And 2. Have significant functional limitations that prevent them from inclusion in competition against athletes in the non-adaptive divisions. And meet the minimum impairment criteria for one of the adaptive divisions. So if I was an adaptive athlete signing up for the Open, those are the rules. And I'd like to point out the wording, must. You must meet these 3. And then after each one, we had the word and. But that word must, it doesn't imply we prefer this or this is the ideal situation. If in the rules you read an athlete must start with both feet behind the line, it would be clear what CrossFit expects from you. Now, some of those rules are pretty straightforward, but that second point, it's a little bit subjective, right? Because what does it mean to be able to compete with athletes not in the adaptive division? Is it simply that I can physically do each and every movement? Maybe it's a real struggle, it's very slow, but I can do it. So even though I'm going to finish at the bottom of the Open, I shouldn't join the adaptive category? Or does it mean that maybe I'm just not getting a score that's as high as I feel my fitness should be reflected? Well, maybe we'll come back to this in a minute. But before I go any further, because I am going to have to speak about actual challenges that have been made, I'd just like to introduce now the idea of a hypothetical group of adaptive athletes that read that rule and decided because they'd competed at RX competitions or they just felt that they could do the Open RX anyway, did not feel they were eligible to compete in the adaptive division and chose not to do so. We will come back to this group a couple of times. Now, this rule has been a topic of hot debate among adaptive athletes as to whether or not some athletes should be disqualified from competing in the adaptive division because they've been able to compete at other competitions in the RX division. In fact, to the point that official challenges have been made. Now again, I am not here to say who should or should not compete at the CrossFit Games. That's not my job. I know there are medical issues involved, so obviously I have not seen that information. But what I have been sent is the correspondences between someone that made a challenge regarding somebody else's eligibility. And the response they got is very interesting and raises a number of questions. Now, again, I'm not going to say who it was from or who it was about, but I will tell you that the main focus of the challenge was that second part of the rule, whether or not they competed with athletes in the RX division. And this is the reply that they received from Alex Zirkenbach. He is the Accessibility and Adaptive Sports Specialist, Seminar Staff, CrossFit Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Board member. So basically, he is the man in charge when we're speaking about the adaptive division. So once again, I'm just going to read to you the reply that he sent. So he said, I understand you think they should not compete because they also participate in non-adaptive divisions. But since they meet all the minimum impairment criteria, they have been ruled eligible. The competition among non-adaptive athletes clause will be removed from the AAP next season as it does not have an objective measurement. Went on to cite an example, and then it said, we expect the best adaptive athletes in the world, i.e. top 5 at the games, to be competitive against non-adaptive athletes in some events and tasks. Now, you might read that differently to me, but the way I understand it is they're not addressing this second point as something that should mean someone is not eligible to compete. On the contrary, they're saying that if you're top 5 and you're going to go to the games, well, then we would expect you to be competitive even against non-adaptive athletes. And you know what? To a degree, I understand that as a non-adaptive athlete. I would fully expect someone like Kim DeCarroll to absolutely destroy me in a workout, despite the fact that she is blind. But that's not the point. The point is, there is a rule. You remember that hypothetical group of people I mentioned? How should they feel because they chose not to compete because they felt that they weren't eligible because of that rule? Now, I actually reached out to Alex. I said, someone's told me that the competition among non-adaptive athletes clause will be removed from the AAP next season. Do you have any comments on if that is the case? Now, as here I've asked specifically if he has any comments, I'm going to assume that the reply I've been sent is on the record and that I can share it. So he said, I don't have a comment on the 2023 AAP. So there is no official word there. Fair enough. But he said that I already know what he said to, and what's interesting is he quotes the person that the original email was from, assuming they've spoken to me. I actually got it through a third person, so I did correct him on that and tell him that it wasn't that person that's told me, but obviously more people know about this situation. But he also said, the clause has never been used to deem an athlete eligible or ineligible, as it does not have objective measures. Many adaptive athletes have competed in numerous non-adaptive divisions and competitions. An adaptive athlete competing in a non-adaptive competition has far too many variables, such as the fitness level of other athletes, the tasks in the events, and the adaptations used to be used as an eligibility determination. An adaptive athlete could win a local non-adaptive competition and still be completely eligible for CrossFit competitions. And I expect that to happen if the Games athletes are supposed to be the fittest athletes in the world. So if I've understood this correctly, what I'm being told is we don't use that clause anyway. So why is it in the rulebook? Why is it included in one of 3 elements that you must have in order to be eligible? Now I know what you're thinking. I'm going to mention my hypothetical group again, aren't I? I'm not, because you've already understood that it's not fair for them. No, now I'm going to mention what does this mean for the legitimacy of CrossFit as a sport and the rulebook in general. How should Annika Greer feel? Yes, it passed the deadline submission. The rule is the rule. There's nothing we can do. We can't change it for you. Or what about Kim DeCarroll? She would have won her division. But again, there was an issue with the submission, despite the fact that CrossFit were there and had seen her take on the workout. But once again, the rule is the rule. We cannot bend the rule for you. Or what about Victor Longsved? Sorry, because we don't feel you fulfilled every aspect of the rule. Each point, even though they were separated by a comma, and you felt that you only needed one of them, but we actually felt you needed more than one of each of these points. Well, sorry, you can't be on a team anymore. You've lost out on your chance to go to the games. Understandable. The rule is the rule. But now, a rule that was a must rule has become a rule we do not use because there is no objective measurement. Although actually speaking to adaptive athletes, I've been told they feel there is an objective measurement. But that's another point. So yes, the adaptive division deserves better. And no, this is not an attack on those that have qualified for the games and whether or not I feel they merit being there. This is just asking the question, if CrossFit wants to be considered as a professional sport, can it chop and change the rules as it sees fit, even this late in the season? Now, if you've stuck around this long and watched the whole video, thank you so much. And I would ask kindly that you could share it with as many people as possible, because I do think it's important that we get as many people in the CrossFit community to see what is happening here. So thank you for watching. Please like the video, subscribe if you haven't done already, particularly as I don't think this is going to earn me any points with CrossFit, so that job offer is probably not coming anytime soon. So I need your support more than ever. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in a future video.